Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Thanks to the folks at Magic who invited me for today's session. My name's Kevin. I'm with Dymaptic, and I'll just get into the slides because I do have one about me, and I'll just flip to that. Dymaptic, first of all, is the company I'm with. We're a small organization. We support various customers across the country, from local small business and private industry as well. Um, and you can see towards the bottom a lot of the Esri partner and specialties that we hold, nonprofit and state and local government. So about me, I'm Kevin. I'm located in Knoxville, so I'm probably east of everyone that's there, which is cool. And I've been doing GIS for over 20 years now. And in that 20 years, I've accumulated a few of these certificates and things. I have them listed there, and I'll just go right on past that. So today's talk is we're going to talk about ArcGIS Monitor and integrating Monitor's ability of using webhooks into chat software. And so my first question is for everyone watching and listening is just get thinking is how do you use Monitor? Do you just use it out of the box? Do you not? Do you not have it yet? If you don't, you should. But is it out of the box? Do you use out of the box with emails? Are you using webhooks? Or are you going to do, or do you do things like we're going to show today, custom code and really digging into Monitor to do some fun things? I realize I asked that question to everybody, but just as a kind of a thought process there, questions and things in the chat, I'm going to do my best to answer everything at the end. So just put any questions you have in there. I'm not going to watch it just because I'm going to try to show you some demonstrations and how code works during this presentation. So any questions, we'll get to them at the end, and I'll do my best to answer it. So if you are in some of that range there, those three users, or you have interest in Monitor, I hope you find what we're going to do here interesting. I'm just going to cut to the chase. If you've seen Monitor, you've seen reports, well, that's fine, but we're going to show this that's on the screen. This is Slack. This is what we use at Dymaptic. So that is my chat software of choice. And I'm taking a Monitor alert and directly feeding that right into my chat Slack channel. Right off the bat, you can see a notice comes in, and we have some buttons that you can interact with. Those are, to me, kind of the star of the show here is being able to interact with Monitor directly through your chat software and not through the interface. So to explain that, you see the output first is what is behind the scenes that that powers that output. So I'm using something called N8N, and that's one of the an automated code workflow. You can think, if you haven't used N8N, think Zapier, think Power Automate. And there are two workflows there. One workflow processes all the alerts from Monitor, and the other one handles all the chat interactions. The interactions are handled with Slack, and there's interactive messaging buttons that are configured using their Slack block format. The information is synthesized using Claude, so we're going to do a little AI today too, and we're going to focus on Anthropic's Claude models for that, and this could work with any other vendor. And lastly is ArcGIS Monitor. Otherwise, we wouldn't really have much to talk about. So I told you all that, showed you the pictures, but I think it's important to talk about how it got to this point. So about 2 or 3 years ago, I started down this path because I wanted a different way to view the alerts from Monitor. And that path was custom code. I used Python, and this was pre AI. And so I used a Flask web server with Python. And behind the scenes, I had to access ArcGIS Monitor's PostgreSQL database. So for those that are unfamiliar with Monitor, there is a ArcGIS Monitor install, and then there's a database install of Postgres that goes along with it, and that's where everything is stored. So I was going behind the scenes and getting into that database. This required manual data extraction and really platform-specific code. In this case, I was working on a Windows server, but if you were to try to replicate this, you had to be in that line of sight. You couldn't deviate from this path. I also had to have that server on another machine. On a machine, it was hosted locally, but you have to have server and all these other setups with it. Anytime there was a change, anytime I wanted to update an alert, I had to do code changes. And so when I built it, I realized this is pretty cool, but there's got to be a simpler way. And that way wasn't clear to me until about January of this year, I think it was. And what happened there was I was stumbled upon a blog post. The QR code is if you didn't want to type um, the link out, and I'll put it in the chat when we get to a good stopping point here. Is in Esri on the Esri community in the monitors, ArcGIS monitors section. One of the Esri staff posted on how to access ArcGIS Monitor through the API. And the key part of that was just the login, the authentication part. And it just hadn't occurred to me. I'd seen the REST calls and all the things that were happening behind the scenes, but I didn't put it all together until I read that post. So I have to give credit to that, first of all. And what that really changed was I didn't have to go into the database. I didn't have to go and try to break apart alerts and do a bunch of queries. The alert data comes right out of the API. All I have to do is get it into chat. And so it laid the foundation for a simpler approach. At least I think it's simpler. And it allowed me to do something like N8N, which I'm going to show today, and Claude to start synthesizing those alerts and the messages out of Monitor. So that's what we're going to get into. Here's how it works. First of all, ArcGIS Monitor has an alert that fires. N8N, the automation, has a particular node that allows you to send a message to a webhook. If you're not familiar with webhooks, you can think of it as someone saying, "Don't call me, I'll call you." So what you've got is a website, a web URL, a link is listening always, and then you phone home. And so what happens in ArcGIS Monitor in this case has an alert. It sends the webhook, the phone home over to the N8N. Once the N8N, the automation receives the information out of Monitor, it starts up this workflow process. Inside that process, Claude then parses the webhook, figures out the alerts and the information. It then queries ArcGIS Monitor's REST API, and then sends that information back into a Claude, which has a custom prompt that I put together to get the Slack messages, and those Slack messages are formatted and sent over to Slack, and then I see the message in my software. For anyone else that's not using Slack or N8N, substitute Teams, substitute Power Automate, substitute Zapier, Discord, or whatever you like to use. I'm gonna again cut to the chase and just go with a live demo here. Wish me luck. I think everything's going to work fine, but I want to show this to you first, and then we're going to talk about how I built it. The hope here is that you can see what's happening, and then when I start to talk about those pieces of the puzzle, it all kind of fits, and then when we're done today, you can go back and build this yourself. So one or two things are going to happen. I'm going to trigger an alert, or I'll replay one that's already in the system, and within a few seconds, this automation is going to run. I will see a Slack message show up. There's going to be some buttons. I'll talk about those buttons. We'll click a few of them, and you're going to have some notifications, or not notifications, but comments that are on the Slack messages saying that I was the one that pressed the button. So here we go. Switch this, and let me just ArcGIS Monitor, where's Notebook? Just want to enable that. And so inside of Slack, I've turned on my notifications here. This is N8N, and you can see the workflow there. And I just turned it on, and you just saw that 3 new alerts just fired on my my workflow. And so the workflow comes in. I'm going to show you this one that just played. And it comes into this webhook, and so we have a payload that comes in from Monitor. It authenticates back into ArcGIS Monitor. Claude extracts our information, and then a couple loops happen. The final output, we just drag over Slack for everyone, is these alerts are coming into my channel. And so what you see is this one was, I'm on Eastern time, so that's putting it at Zulu here. So they just showed up. I want to focus on this alert right here. Instance saturation. It's something I'm always looking at when I'm helping people with ArcGIS or dedicated services. So I happen to have a instance saturation that was detected inside a monitor. Now, I happen to fire this off just to, in all transparency there for my sample world cities, because I know nobody's really using that one right now. But what's happened behind the scenes is monitor detected that the instances were saturated. So I was running at over 100% plus my threshold, and that was for a minute. And it tells me right here that I've got a minimum of one instance and a maximum of two. So there's a couple of things that are happening in that workflow. The alert just tells you that there's a instance saturation. The other flow steps go through and it finds the component and it finds the information about the thresholds and the information about our services. It's all laid out nice and clear. And the other part that Quad's able to help us with are some recommended actions. And so what it's suggesting here is, of course, increase your max instances. If it's shared, move it to a dedicated instance. Check for a long-run request and some other things to just give you some tips on what's going on. Now, this Slack message has 3 buttons. These are interactive buttons. The first button, it just opens monitor to see the alert. The second button actually updates ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Portal. And what it does is it updates the system notifications so that this is just a particular service. But if I was having server issues, what that can allow me to do is to update my banner on Portal. So I can let all my users know, hey, there's something going on. GIS staff is aware of it. They're working on it. And we'll send it all clear when things are done. So the thought behind that is I can immediately take some action when things come through and monitor. And what that allows us to do is buy some time. So to hopefully stave off some of those calls. Hey, what's going on? What's happening? Is, oh, okay, I see something's already going on. The last button is the logic inside of that second alert the first workflow is it sees that this is an instant saturation and it adds that button. It's not on all of my chats. You'll see the next one that came in, it doesn't have the increased instances. So what happens? What happens? Well, let me show you what happens. Is if I'm in ArcGIS Enterprise, I'm logged in here, you can see there's no notifications. But if I switch back into Slack and I hit the button here to update the system notification, it now knows that one, the notification was updated by me, and I have the option now to clear the notification. So on my portal right now is I now have a message to all my users that GIS systems experiencing issues and staff are investigating. The nice part here then is once everything is done, I hit this button, I clear the notification. It's been cleared, shows that Kevin cleared it, and I refresh the page and we're all clear. All good. Now, you can see my sample world cities is getting hit right now. I only got 2 on it. But what happens when I hit this button? I'm going to increase the max number of instances by 1. Now, when you increase your instances, it does restart the service. And that's just a byproduct of this operation. And I'm okay with that because if it restarts, it's still trying to buy some time. Add that extra instance, I can get into the logs. I can see if there's some bad queries. Maybe somebody injected some bad geometry and it's causing some issues and slowness behind the scenes. So now you can see right there, I hit that button. Now we're up to 3. And so I was at 2 before, and whoever's using it is using it. It's actually me. I have something in the background that's making that go up. So that's the process and how the chat is working. Once it clears, let me just scroll and we'll see some more of these errors are coming through. You actually can get some notifications that the alert has been resolved. So that way, you know that things are working themselves out. So with that all said and shown, I'm gonna come back into the workflows and some of these other pieces here in a moment, and we're gonna dig into them a little bit more. And I believe, yep, sorry. Okay. So I showed the whole operation of what's going on behind the scenes. the first thing I want to talk about are the dynamic action buttons. And what I mentioned before is Claude's deciding what buttons appear. In this particular case, I've coded in 3 buttons, and so the logic here is that increased max instances. It's not necessary on every service. It's necessary when we have saturation. There could be other reasons that you want to increase that as well. But the buttons, it all can be placed in here to adapt to what's actionable for each alert type. This allows you to really fine tune and fix your system as problems happen. And so as you saw, I just increased those instances by 1. So let's talk about the workflow, because that's really what's making all this happen behind the scenes. So N8N is free, it's open source. It does have a paid tier as well, and you can even host it on your own systems. And so it replaces the Flask and the Python and the custom code. It's just one of those visual workflows. And you'll notice, you may have noticed that there were some HTTP REST calls. And so it's handling some of those calls for us. So there's still some of those tasks that happen. N8N, much like all the other workflows out there, Zapier and Teams, it has built-in connectors. So it has built-in HTTP requests. It comes with those webhooks to listen. And it even it has connectors for Slack. It has connectors for Teams. And it has all these things built in for us so that we don't have to use custom code. So inside of the alert workflow, which I'm going to get back over in a second, is the webhook is that first step. So it receives monitor's message, the post message. It authenticates, it extracts, and it loops over the alerts. And it sends that message into Slack. There's not a whole lot of magic here. It's almost kind of a letdown of maybe if I show you these, but 2 of those calls, they're just web posts. The very first one, it just sends a web call to ArcGIS Monitor, and I send it my username and password. Some of you may be thinking is, well, what about security of these things? N8N has its own secure credential store where it's my credentials are saved outside of this workflow, and then it's queried as the workflow runs. The second image that you see on the screen is the call for when we're querying out the alerts. I send across the token in the appropriate format that monitor wants, and I send in my query. The queries behind the scenes are very similar to feature service queries. I have a where statement, and that where statement right there is it's querying out the alert IDs that come across in the webhook, and it returns back a feature set with particular fields that I care about, like the component, the metric, and thresholds and things like that. So the next step, once it's done some of those queries, is the Claude piece, the inference layer, as we sometimes call it. Claude is used 3 times in the workflow. Well, 3 times, 2 times in the first one, and no, I'm sorry, 3 times. So the first thing it does is it parses that webhook. And so why is that important? It means that I don't have to do anything in particular for the JSON. Large language models are really good at structured data and reading that structured data and seeing the patterns and understanding what things mean. And so that's where Claude's being used. It's used again to format the Slack message. So in Slack, it wants things in a particular format. And if anybody's done this type of coding before, you're probably nodding your heads. And Teams does as well. It wants things in a certain place so it can be displayed cleanly, like I showed in the demo. And so it's helping to turn the raw API data into that structured message that then is displayed to us, something that looks clean. And lastly is it does decide which actions to show. So it's reading through the alert and the information, and it's going, oh, this is a saturation. Let me throw up that button. Or it's could be a server's down, so I need to do something else. And it's making those decisions that when it runs through the payload. Now, when I'm running Claude, in this particular instance, I'm using 2 different models. And I'm happy if anyone has questions, we can get into this a little bit later, and I'll do my best to explain it. But the reason I'm using 2 different models is because I'm still trying to be cost conscious when I'm doing things like this. So the very first model that I'm using is the Claude Haiku. It's faster and it's cheap. It's fast and it's cheap, which is some things that don't generally go together. But it's really good at parsing that JSON and finding those IDs for the alerts. I don't need to use a heavy, more costly model for that. I can use the lower end model. The second model is I'm using Claude Sonnet. And if you're familiar with some of the Anthropic offerings, I'm not using Opus for this. I am using Sonnet. I could probably up the game a little bit if I needed to. But Sonnet is good at the rich formatting and figuring out the logic based upon the prompt that I gave it to figure out the recommended actions. So the cost overall is pennies per use. And the important thing that I noted on there is there's no idle cost. So it's API calls for each one of them, and it's done one at a time. So while that webhook is waiting to be called, it's waiting by the phone. Claude there's no cost incurred for that while it sits because your system may not have any alerts, and it just sits and that's fine. It doesn't incur any cost until the model is run. The beauty here is that inside of these workflows, you can easily switch out your models and try different things and test to see what works best for your organization. So I'm focusing on these buttons because I really like when I think it's useful. Is that first leftmost button you see on this screen, the view and monitor, it very simply just opens the URL link. So it opens the web page up to ArcGIS Monitor. The update system notification, there's a little more happening with these. It calls the portal REST API. So if you're wondering what was going on behind the scenes, is there's a step that uses the portal admin because all the portal operations are REST accessible. And so what I've done is I've built out those messages and I send over, hey, my portal has some problems and we're working on it. And then that shows up on portal. So what that means is I don't have to go into portal, find the setting, go to the organization settings and all that down and set those messages up. I just do it from the click. When I clicked it again to clear it, it resends the post with the message being removed. And the same thing, well, very similar, is the increase max instances by 1. That's actually using the ArcGIS Server Admin REST API. And it fires over a update definition call, which if you've dug into that sort of thing, you'll be familiar with that. And it just does a +1. There is a step previous to that where it queries that service. And it says, how many? What's my max instance? Cool. Okay, it's 2. We're just going to add 1. So when I send this back over, we're going to send 3. Now, I happen to be an ArcGIS manager to show you all that it did work, but there's no need to log into manager. There's no need to do anything else from the admin point of view when you're making these calls. You can just do it with REST. And so that's the big thing here. So let me pull up this workflow, and I'm going to go into editor mode. Now, what I want to do is I'm not going to belabor the point on some of these items, but I want to show how some of these things are working. So you say, well, Kevin, how do I go back and set this up? So in ArcGIS Monitor, you set up your notification, and then here you would say, I need a webhook. When I create a webhook step inside of N8N, it gives me 2 URLs, a testing and a production URL, and that URL is right here. And that URL is the URL you're going to take and paste into ArcGIS Monitor. So what I would do is I would copy that, which it's done, copied it for me. I'm going to come over here to my administration notifications. You can also do this through collections. I edit my webhook settings, and lo and behold, there's the URL, and I paste it here. I'm not doing anything extra with the advanced settings if anyone's curious on it. But you paste that in there, turn on your webhook, and it'll start sending the information. So once you have that set, you just start plugging things in. The authentication level, it's using a post. There's the direct URL in to get the token, and it moves right along. The quad step, this is the few things here I want to show you, is this is a built-in node in N8N, and I can just choose the model that I want. And you can see here that I've got Claude Haiku installed. I can switch it to any of these that I need to. The other important part is the prompt. So I gave it a little bit of instruction. This is all I told it. Your webhook parser, this is your payload, this is what the format looks like. I want you to find these few pieces of information, and you're going to send it back out um, to the next step. The data then is converged because you can have multiple alerts that fire at once, and so it merges all the alerts together. It loops over the alerts and it queries into Monitor. It does a couple queries to get more information out. That information is then aggregated again, and then the alerts are analyzed in this quad anthropic step. This prompt here is a little bit larger, but that's where I put some rules in. I let it know what's happening. I tell it that you must output JSON because the next step for sending things to Slack needs to be JSON. And I've got some information in here about it and how it chooses things. So one of those steps is, if I'm doing these conditions, then you need to do some of these things. And it just kind of works its way down from there. Here's some of those recommended actions and other little JSON steps. What you have right here, let me back that up. This is what the Slack output looks like. It's not prescriptive to say you have to do it this way, but it lays out a framework for it so that it knows what pieces to put into the Slack output. So it's not direct code, very linear. It's kind of, here's this template, and the template's kind of free form, and you can do all this kind of stuff with it. From there, it parses that back out for Slack. I think it's just removing some JSON. And then it goes off to Slack, and you'll see here it's got the Slack icon. I didn't do that. That is out of the box. That's what N8N offers. It's one of their connectors, and it goes into Slack. So I want to talk some more about the button handling, because I said from the start we have two of these workflows. The first one receives the monitor alerts. The second one handles those button presses. So this is something that you would have to handle because there's logic involved in those buttons. So you notice when I updated the notification, it went from add the notification to clear the notification. Well, that's been coded. Slack helps with that. So when these buttons are created, they need a webhook, and that webhook is also generated at N8N. I'll show you that in just a moment. And it needs an action ID and some other information. And that information is created in the previous workflow in that quad step where it's adding that information in. And it will then parse it out. And so inside of this next workflow, there's three steps. There's three buttons. And so I'll show you, but you can add the monitor link. We can turn on and off the notifications. And then lastly is we up our instances. This can be expanded out for whatever operations you need it. And so when a button inside of Slack is pressed, it sends a message to the Slack server, and it knows what it needs to do. That information is then passed back and forth through these workflows, and then the buttons are updated on the screen and extra information. So I'm not going to switch over to the code view. I took a screenshot of this one, but it's essentially like this. The Slack workflow is here. That's created. That is a webhook that is generated from Slack. That's pasted in. The payload is then parsed. And depending on the action, that action ID I was talking about, that's our path. So if we're doing a portal notification, we come this way, we get our portal token, we enable the notification, and we rebuild the Slack response, and it goes right back into portal. The second one here is if we click that button again and we're disabling notification, same thing, gets the token, and then it sends the disable. Inside of both of these steps is that payload to portal, and that clears or adds the message. Lastly, we go back through and it gets the service information, gets our authentication, gets the service information. A little script comes through, finds that service number, and then it posts it onto ArcGIS server, and that's the end of that. And it just ends right there. So those are the steps behind the scenes that you would have to set up in order to have some interactions with your messages as well. A part of this whole thing, and the reason the buttons are there is because I just kind of wanted to see how to do that, and that was the process that I came up with. So inside of Slack, And that, let me flip back to the other slide. So this first item here, the Slack interaction, no, webhook, is you have to enable interactivity inside of Slack. So if you're in this again, same thing for all the other ones, but in Slack, you go into the administrative place, the administrative console, you create an app, and then you enable interactivity. So this one is my monitor interactions, and you can see down here I have interactivity and shortcuts, and I turn that on, and it wants that webhook that comes out of in. I think I misspoke before and said Slack gives you the webhook. I apologize. It's the webhook from in. That gets pasted right into there, and it's essentially ready to go. So then the process is click notification, the post happens, and the second in runs. These are those fields I was describing that are necessary for this to work. And the previous workflow is what sets up that information. All right, and so you saw some of these, the portal before, press it, and there it is afterwards. We have the accountability. ArcGIS Monitor offers that when you have your alerts and your comments. This also does it in the Slack channel. It keeps all the information in one place. I guess I'm the only one that's doing these things, or it's you're setting up a presentation, so you have all that. A little redundant here, but I just want to get the point across is what's happening behind the scenes is that button triggers the workflow. We authenticate, we read those instances, we do a +1, and then Slack sees that happened, and it tells us that we've made that action. We didn't have to use the browser, we didn't have to go to Server Manager, and the key line there is anything that is available in the REST API for server or portal or anything else you could think of, you could access here and hook into those buttons. So there's probably some folks wondering about security and things. Is every secret is in the encrypted credentials store. The tokens that I request for monitor, they're about 1 hour. You could decrease that if you needed to, and then the portal tokens again are on run. And so each time these run, a fresh token is gathered. So it's not long-lived tokens for this process. The inbound webhooks, they are public. And the nice thing is with Slack is it does validate the signature so that not anybody can just turn it on and off your buttons and trigger the webhooks. That's not going to happen. And the other part is I mentioned when I was setting up the notification inside of Monitor, you could add that secret. I don't have it for today's demonstration, but you could do that as well, and it all runs HTTPS. So I'm using Slack, but you can integrate this into anything. You could continue with N8N and just wire in Teams if you really wanted to wire in Teams. You could wire in Discord as well. I don't have that demonstration for you, but they're all there. Those nodes are available. Some changes you would need to be aware of is that the formatting does change. They don't all use the same structure for how the messages come across to the user. So there is a little setup. The beauty is with the N8N and the interface is that a lot of those things are just click and fill in. So you'd say the channel or whoever else you want things to go to. Everything else about it would stay the same. So you could take these workflows, bring them in for your system, and then just change the output to the appropriate place. So hopefully it's clear as mud, and you're able to take this and integrate some of this in your own workflow. So you need ArcGIS Monitor. I forgot to mention this, and I need to mention this to you now. The REST endpoints are beta. I did have it on the slide, but I forgot to say it out loud. Those are beta. They're not officially supported by Esri. I personally don't see them going away because Monitor itself uses the same endpoints. So I think this is something that can be used over and over again. I think that support may come in the future, but I have no guarantees of that. You can use N8N. You can just sign up right now, and you don't need a server. There's no hosting cost. There's a few limitations, but I don't know that you would run into it using one of these methods. We use Claude. I use Claude for this, and you would have to have a Claude account with an API key. That's fairly simple to set up within the Claude interface. There's a section for API keys, and you generate one and add that key in when you set up your Claude node. And finally, you need that Slack workspace with the permissions to create apps. You can replace Slack with whatever your chat is. So the cost, I mentioned this before, the innate stuff is not going to cost anything. The Claude API is typically pennies per use. It just depends on your model and what you've asked your prompt to build out, and then monitor. Hopefully you already have it. One thing that I should note is that if you have an ELA with Esri, you may already be licensed for monitor, so it's no extra cost. You may already be included in what you have. And if that's the case, you probably need to use it. And even if you don't use it for something like this, it's just have it for your systems to start really seeing how things are working. And I think the effort here, an afternoon of your time, and what I did and how I got this made. Actually, in full disclosure, I used Claude to help me make this. I let Claude write the innate JSON and just imported them in, and I would iterate over that. So if something wasn't right, we'd come back and forth, and I'd build a node or two, and I'd export that JSON, feed that back into Claude, so I'd get that iterative loop going on to make the process better. And so that last line is the maintenance is your configuration. It's not the code. You don't have to sit and keep rewriting the code. Now, are there gotchas? There can be. And you may have been looking at things and have some questions. And you're going, hey, Kevin, what about this? I just saw you did that. So there are some gotchas that can happen. The API is still beta, but I think it's safe to use. There's not deduplication in what I have created. Meaning, if an alert fires multiple times, I have not put a way in here to deduplicate that alert so that you may see it fire a couple of times. A new token on every run, I just got done explaining that, and somebody was probably thinking, well, why would you want a new one every time? Is you could cache that token and then do a refresh on the process so that you don't have to keep asking for a token on each run. And there's no rate limiting. So like I say about that massive alerts coming through is you could flood the channel. So you could put some logic in with that. And that's where I think given some time, I'd like to integrate more of the Claude side of the house so that I could cache some of the alerts and then have it read and see what did I just put back out? What is there? What is here? And do I really need to fire this again? And right now, one of the things that I showed was the alerting. I did not show any notifications from Monitor that were related to components, incidents, or collections. And I think there's a few others behind the scenes. I was specifically looking for alerts and looking for system help. And the other thing is, and I don't know that it's worth bringing up. I don't know how big a deal it is, but by design, anyone can click those buttons that has access to the channel. So ideally, your GIS admins or people that are going to be responsible for your system would be in that channel so that anybody that has access to the channel also has access to the alerts. Some fun things. What else could you do? There's a lot of things. There's a lot of other things you can do. And I'll plug a presentation. It's not put out yet to rewatch. But you can do custom reporting. And so about 3 weeks ago, I did a presentation for the Esri ArcGIS Monitor user group where our CTO, Christopher, and I showed off some Claude skills. And we're using those to generate custom reports for ArcGIS Monitor. We're automatically generating and loading in analysis views into ArcGIS Monitor. And those reports and the views, they can have custom templates. And the other thing that's just still kind of in a skunk works is I'm working on a way to automatically tune the alert thresholds. It's working pretty well so far. And I think that's one of the key things in getting Monitor working well for people's systems, because all the systems are different. But to go in and use Claude or AI to review your alerts and maybe the out-of-the-box alert thresholds aren't what you need, or really they fire too often, or not enough, depending on how your system is set up, is that you can put things like Claude um, against your system, have it read a week's worth of data, and see where the alerts can be finely tuned, see where things are good, see where things are bad. So um, maybe so for the instance saturation is sure 100% is good to know about when things are really locked up, but maybe you don't want that 90% threshold. Maybe you want to know when your instance saturation is at 50% or 75% because you know it could hit that 100%. And those alerts, there's going to be about 60 alerts, I think, for every service. And if you have 100 services, well, you can do the math, and there's a lot of alerts in there. So having some tools that can go in and help you tune those alerts would be really great as a way to expand this. And lastly, what could those reports look like? Well, these are reports that we actually have made for folks. All innocent parties removed, I think, and I hope. But what you see here are AI generated reports from ArcGIS Monitor querying these REST endpoints. Your report on the left is showing you a healthy system and that there's no action required. The system on the right is our alerts will tell you one thing that you could do better. So looking at everything in the system, what can be done better? And that's what's happening here, and that's what's being shown in that report. And so we've got some layers that could use some optimization because the response times aren't really what we want them to be. And you can see in the middle there that we are at 100% connectivity, so we aren't having any servers drop or any connectivity issues there. So that's where you can go from here. And I think it really opens some possibilities by adding in Claude or whatever your AI choice is to help synthesize all this alert information and really get your system operational so that you can support your end users, whoever they be. And with that, I will can stop the slideshow and get into the chat and open up for some questions if anybody has any questions.
That was really great, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I do see one question in the chat. Did you have to learn anything about networking before getting your Security Plus cert?
Yes. Yes. The that certificate was rough. And much of that Security Plus is network, like knowing all the network layers and things. And I had a little bit of background in networks and architecture and stuff, so it did help. It helped with that, but I would recommend uh, that knowledge prior to taking that exam, or even doing a boot camp type course to get you to pass it, because that's what they did. So I see some folks they had out of the box, which is great, and hopefully seeing things like this and being able to know that this is out there, you can take the next step, and maybe dive right deep into the custom code. Let's see.
Is there anyone else who has any questions?
Oh, and I owe you the link, so you don't have to copy it, and I can make these slides available. But this is the Esri community post link. I'll put it in the chat. Right there. So if you want to read about that and get started accessing Monitor through the API. Learning Tree is where I went for the Security Plus course. If they still offer it, I don't know. This was back in a long time ago. There's
I did have a question back there
Yeah.
on the reports that you had pulled up, and I'm sorry if I missed this. Those reports, was it querying like the past day events and summarizing
Oh,
that?
yeah. And so that's the next step with all this stuff. And actually, I don't know how much time we have left, but I could probably do a live demo of it. They take about 2 minutes to run. So yes, it's clear, regular language to where, let's say, Carrie, you're coming over to me and you're like, Kevin, what was going on last week with the server? Oh, okay. So that question right there, you can just type it right in. Say, how was the server over the last week? Um, or you could do something like, give me the last 30 days, give me the last month, or um, how the server performed during the week, or on the weekend, or certain days. Is that's the beauty of some of this. What I've shown here with the monitor stuff is it's kind of set. Your prompts are set, but with these other skills and things that you can use um, with AI is you can just use that natural language query and just ask it, and then it goes back through. And so for those that haven't used skills with AI, is think of it as a tool. Think of it as like a just a tool that you would have, and it just be, I'm going to go grab a shovel because I need to get a hole dug. Well, you're going to go grab this reporting skill because you need a report. Um, and it's all set up behind the scenes with some, sometimes it can be code, like for ours, it's a bunch of PowerShell scripts that run, but the AI knows how to run those scripts, and it knows how to interpret the results, and it knows how to um, generate those reports off of it. And the first time I ran those, it was really interesting because I knew the system quite well, and it told me exactly the stuff that I had been seeing, but it did it in a way that was, oh, wow, this is really different, and it also found a couple things that I didn't see, and so it's good at crunching those numbers and reading that structured text. Um, but at some other time, I can, well, if the that user group meeting comes online, be able to see that there. So I don't know if we'd have enough time for me to fire those up, but it's interesting, and pretty exciting too, because we're seeing a lot of folks that want to use that ability.
Yeah, it's very neat. Just kind of keep track, and even if you did it like on a daily basis, if you're managing a lot of servers or applications, to track that daily or weekly, or see where things may have went wrong one week. Just having that
Correct.
report to go back to and for comparison, I think would be really useful.
Yeah, and that's one thing that comes out of those, is you can say I need to see a weekly status for the month of October with a monthly roll up. So then it'll line it each week that happens, some hits and misses, and then overall what happened during that month, and take it all out. And it really comes back into be something that's usable. And we're having some success with it, and I think people are liking it as well. So I guess I can get these the slides if anybody would want to see it. My plan is to take this process and create it into a blog that will be hosted on the Dymaptic website. I've been remiss in getting it ready, but I'll have that out there, and then we could share that link with all the folks that had come today too.
That'd be great.
Cool.
I know as you went through the presentation, I would be like, oh, I have a question. And then you'd get to it and answer it. And then like, oh, I have another question. And then you'd get to it and answer it. And I was like, well, that was really great how you went through each step and how each step functioned, how they connected to each other. So it's a really interesting process. And that's something I'd seen before, especially with like the innate in. That's something I hadn't heard of before, and kind of how that you can utilize that. So that was really neat.
Yeah, and the N8N, which the name of it, I don't know, but there's some silliness behind it. It's more AI focused. You can use a lot of the tools to build your workflows and integrate a lot of the AI analysis and other um, offerings into it. So it's a little more focused on that, and that was the choice, and that was the reason um, that I went with that. But doing it in Power Automate as well, so you're not limited. And that's why I know I said it a bunch, but I want to make sure that we've got a lot of folks here listening, is that you're not limited just because I said one um, particular provider. Is there are other ways to do this.
We utilize Power Automate a lot here
Mhm.
at MLDW.
Well, great. I guess if anybody has any questions, I had my email up on the presentation. Is just send them along, and I'll do my best to answer it. And if you have anything else, I can always be happy to answer any questions. Or if I get a bunch of them, I can do a whole answer, question and answer uh, reply, so everyone can have that as well.
All right. Thank you everybody for attending, and thank you, Kevin, so much.
Yep. Thank you all.
Have a great day.
Yep. Bye.